Welcome back everyone to my latest YouTube tutorial. Now we are going to be doing some gnomes today. Gnomes are a very popular topic, and one of my highest watched videos is a gnome trio, but it was in wintertime during the holiday season. So I'm going to give this little trio a whole new life and put them in a springtime garden. So these are going to be garden gnomes, and we are going to give this adorable little trio some bright and vibrant colors nestled in our little flower garden. So I am using 100% cotton paper. I've already sketched them out here, but I'm going to go over the sketching process just so you have an idea. Using a basic number 2 pencil. This is a mechanical one, and I will be using my Core Paints, QOR by Golden, as well as various brush sizes. Most likely, let's see, I have a 10 here, and I'll probably throw in around 4 to get some of the smaller detail areas. My water and a paper towel handy with me, so go grab your supplies and we will get started. So first and foremost, I've taped down my paper because I want it to be nice and secure. I want to create this nice little border around. I'm going to sketch out my gnomes. Now these gnomes have these big bushy beards, so they're going to take up all of the space that normally would be the body of a gnome. We're not going to actually see the body. We're only seeing kind of their shoulders up, and their beards are covering all of that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my center gnome. And gnomes are super easy to draw. They're made up of just a couple of components. So I always start by sketching out the hat. Let's zoom in a little bit. There we go. Now you can really get a detailed view. So I always start by sketching out the hat and then giving the hat some personality with the top. You can do bent tops, straight up tops, all different kinds of pom-poms. But here is my top. I'm just going to do a triangle in the middle. So there's some version of a triangle. This guy, I'm going to give a little pom-pom on the top. The nose is just a half C shape, or a C shape, sorry, or a half moon or a crescent shape just on its side. So a nose here. For his mustache, I'm gonna tuck this part behind. That one's gonna go behind, and then the beard itself is gonna come down. Just be a few little details with the shagginess there. So then my second gnome I'm gonna put over here on this side. Start with the hat. Decide what kind of hat you want. Do you want it to be sticking up, bent over, super long and pointy? I'm gonna give him just a little string off the end there. Again with the nose. And then he's going to get a nice shaggy beard. And then finally this guy over here. Hat. This one's going to have a lot of creases in it. Should I give him a pom-pom on the end? Maybe. And with these fine fellas, I am going to add some ink in with my watercolor. So I'm not just going to paint over these lines, but I'm going to use one of my micron pens to actually trace over these darker lines with some permanent ink. And at the very end, I'm going to give the hats most of their personality with some bleed-proof white. So Dr. Peach Martin's bleed-proof white to put on some white details onto their hats. But let's see, let's give one of them some stripes. So I'm just going to go at an angle here. Now, once you start your stripes on a piece or garment of clothing, you have to remember to kind of keep following in a parallel line fashion to the first stripe you put down. Because if you start to veer off of that, it'll look a little wonky. So it might not follow the pattern or the cloth exactly. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. All the way to the top. There we go. So he's going to have a striped hat. This one I think I'll just add on polka dots or something like that with the bleed proof white. And this one maybe some other designs. But this, the stripes are actually going to be painted 2 different colors. Okay. So now we have our outline. I'm going to add the ink on last after we've painted them in. Now we have to decide on a color palette. So I'm going to be putting lots of greens and a few pinks and yellows in the background for the flowers. So I'm going to keep my gnomes hats in, I think blues, phthalo blue color. So I'm going to take some phthalo blue. Let me find a clean spot, or let's make a clean spot on my palette. I don't think I'm going to find a clean spot. Let's clean this off right here. All right. So let's get into this phthalo blue. I'm going to add a little Payne's gray to make it more of a navy color. Gives it a little bit of an earth-toned nature. And then, let's see, what other color do we want in here? Oh, maybe some yellows, some like golden yellow colors. A little bit muted. So let's start, I'm going to start with my Diarylide yellow. It's a really warm golden yellow. And then if you want to desaturate a color a little bit, you put a little bit of its complement in it. So this yellow's complement is purple. So I'm going to add just a little purple, and it's just going to desaturate it and make it a little bit more muted, a little bit more of an earth tone. So I like this blue and yellow here. And let's see what else we could do. I know I'm going to do some, let's do another earth tone woodsy color. I'm going to start with quinacridone magenta up here. And the opposite of this is green. So I'm going to pull a little green into it and make this very warm pinkish brown color, burgundy color. So now we have actually some nice primaries, some phthalo blue, but adding a little Payne's gray to it, some Diarylide yellow or a warm yellow, adding a little purple, and some magenta. So these are primary colors, but they've been desaturated. And I think I like that. So we're going to start painting in, and actually I'm going to add a little purple to this. I want it to be more of a purpley. There we go. Yeah, I like that. So I added a little purple to this magenta and green color, and I've gotten this really nice earth toned purple color. Yeah, and that looks really great with those two. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start picking hats. I am going to do this hat here in stripes with purples. So I'm just adding a little bit of that purple tone. And I'm making this darker on one side and lighter on the other. So I'm starting on, and I'm going to go every other one for right now. So I'm putting down paint on the edge, adding some water to it. So it's a little lighter on the outside. Go again. Doo, doo, doo. And I'm just going to follow this all the way up. If you're feeling really brave, skip one, and you can actually do 2 at a time. This one follows all the way over here. And again, just adding some color and then using a little water to blend it out off to the side. And if you need to use a smaller brush, I'm using a size 10 right now. If you need to use a smaller brush for smaller areas, you absolutely can. These brushes are great because they keep a nice fine point. I'm using a Princeton Velvet Touch. So you will see a link to my supplies in the description if you're looking for. I use a lot of Princeton Select Velvet Touch, which those are a little harder to get online. Princeton Select is pretty easy to get online. And then my silver black velvet brush I use very often. And then I have some other brushes that I got from overseas. So, but the Select are great. The Princeton Select, those are the blue ones. Those are great entry-level brushes. These here. Oh, you can't see that. These here are great. Go all the way to the edge. Okay, great. And then if you want to do another layer on any of these, you definitely can, going in and darkening the color. Smoothing out the gradient from one side to the other. Which I will do here. There we go. Now that looks a little weird right there, but I think once I put the final details in and the lines, and I draw the lines in with ink, I think it'll look fine. Okay, so that's one hat down. Let's move on to the next one. I think I'm gonna put the yellow one in the middle, this yellow color, and I'm just gonna keep this a flat wash of yellow. You can definitely, if you want to give it some dimension, put some darker color towards the outside and lift a little color in the middle so that it looks spherical. The part that's coming out at you, the rounded part of the hat, is a little bit lighter. So I'm just lifting color out. So I have a clean, relatively dry brush. I'm not introducing any more new water or color. I'm just lifting out color. So you should see there that it has a nice gradation. It's darker at the edges and lighter at the top. And then our navy. Because this one has a little swoop here, let's see, I'm gonna make that section the darkest under here, as if there's a little bit of a shadow cast underneath. And then from there, I'm gonna just take water and a little bit of lighter paint and just blend it out to the edge. And leaving the rest of it a pretty even wash. It doesn't have to get super, super like light or a bright highlight on the edge here. Just smoothing this transition here a little bit. There we go. So we have some nice contour shape where there's definitely a darker shadowed area over here. Now this is dried almost all the way. Let me pull out some of this yellow again. I just want to make a little bit more yellow, this brownish yellow color. I'm just going to hit the edges of this again. Now that it's dry. And then I'm going to take my clean wet brush and just blend it towards the center. So ultimately just making darker edges, but having them blend in. Excellent. So now all we have to do is tackle the other varying color on the stripes there. And I have to think about that for a minute, what we want to do. Let me see. Okay, so I think I am actually going to use an olive green color. I think that'll look really nice as a complementary stripe to this. So let me see. I have a sap green in here that is pretty good. Maybe I'll put it up here by my blue. And I'm just trying to decide if I want to add a little magenta to that to neutralize this sap green even a little bit more, which I did. So I add a little quinacridone magenta. So now I have a very olive green. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the purple. I added a little bit of color to the one side, and then I'm going to use just a clean brush with water to bring the color all the way to the other side to blend it out. So it's a little lighter on the one side than the other. And again, you can do 2 rounds of this or 2 different layers to deepen or intensify the color. So this little gnome trio has seen a couple versions of itself. And I love the idea of having them in different kind of, similar patterns on their hats and similar composition, but then having a whole other kind of look and feel to them. Because we're going to do these earth tone colors, and we're going to do a flowery background. I think we just didn't have a background before. We did like a solid color. And I missed 2 stripes down here. So let's put the green in. And then I just have to go back to this purple color. And add that bottom stripe in. And as it dries, it'll be more on par with the others. And again, anytime you can always add layers. And in watercolor painting, especially with my in-person students, we have a finite amount of time together in class. And I also, in a video, I don't want the video to go on and on and on forever. But when I paint for commissions and things like that, or for my own pieces that I'm creating, often there will be many, many layers, many versions where I'm increasing contrast and adding value to areas. And never is a painting finished on the first layer. Not the paintings that I paint anyway. I had a little bit of my purple bleed into my green here because I didn't wait till it was completely dry. But that's okay. Gives it a little personality. There we go. So that hat is done. I'm going to let it dry completely. My other 2 hats are done. You could definitely do another layer on this blue. I'm going to leave it for now just so we can move on to the next step. So the next step is going to be creating the grays and flesh tones of the nose and the beard. So since I have these already muted primary colors to make gray and to make brown or flesh tones, we actually use our primary colors to mix them together. So I'm going to start with this purpley color here and just really water it down. And then I'm going to add a little bit of this yellow. And it's going to give me this very brownish red flesh tone. But it's a little bit too red for me, so I'm going to add a little bit of the blue just to neutralize it. And depending on what type of flesh tone you want, if you want it to be more yellow, if you want it to be a darker hue or darker color or more ruddy or pink in the cheeks, will dictate. So then once you get the right hue, you're just going to add a ton of water to it in order to make it a very, very light color. So I always swatch out my flesh tones before I put them onto the paper. So that's still a little dark for me. So let's add a whole bunch. I'm just glopping water on here. And it's a little brownish red too. So I'm going to add a little more yellow. And a little bit of straight quinacridone, because I want it to be a little brighter, a little pinkier color. So that's a better color for me. And then if I want it really, really light, just add a ton of water. All right, so I'm gonna go through and tackle their noses with this really pink color, and I'm just gonna go around the edges of the noses, so kind of outlining the whole edge, leaving that center open. And I'll let those dry a little bit. I'm gonna let that kind of absorb into the paper, cleaning off my brush. And then when I'm ready, I'm just gonna go in with a clean brush to the center and just pull in a little bit of that color. So it's gonna fill in the nose, but the outside is going to be a little darker. The inside is gonna have a bit of a highlight to it. Pull out color. And I'm going to let that dry a little bit. It's a little too wet right now, but as it dries, after about 30 seconds or so, I'm going to go pick up some more of this color, and I'm just going to introduce it. See, it's too wet. It went all the way through the whole nose, but I'm going to introduce it to the edges. So let's let that dry, and we're going to work on our gray. So I'm going to start with my blue over here. Actually, I have this blue and green color. It's a great place to start. So with my blue-green mixture over here, I'm going to take some of my flesh tone color. Actually, I'm just going to take magenta and add it in. Look at that. We're going to get a purpley color. And then once you have your purple, you're just going to take some yellow and start to slowly add in yellow. Now this is if you want a gray beard, if you want a brown beard or another color, but this is a gray-white beard. We're gonna leave a lot of the beard white, and we're just gonna add some gray accents that are gonna be like the shadows in the beard. So you can see there, pull this down a little bit. You have a nice gray color, and it's just adding all the primaries together in the right amounts where you're gonna get a completely neutralized color. Adding a ton of water so we get a really light gray color. You want it even lighter than that. So I'm going to take a brush full of water and pick up. And then with this gray, I am going to go and just start to paint in some shadows of where the creases should be, or the shadows in the beard. So giving some suggestion of these stringy long beards, and they're most concentrated around the nose, towards the bottom, using a flicking motion. Same thing here. So under the mustache on this guy, he's got a full mustache that overhangs the rest of his beard. So I'm going to give a little extra attention there. And you want this color to be super, super light, like lighter than you think it should be. Okay? You can still see mine on the camera, but the biggest mistake people make is they think it's going to be so light you can't see it, and that they need to make it darker. You don't. You can always go darker if you have to. If it's so light you literally can't see it, but I promise you, you need it to be really, really light and just a suggestion or a hint of color. Even in here. There we go. And those are our beards and our mustaches. And we will accentuate some of the detail with the pen at the very end. All right, we're going to go back to our pinky peachy flesh tone color. And we're going to go around the edges, leaving the center that really light color. I know it looks a little dark on camera now, but I promise as it dries, it will start to become it will lighten up as it dries. And then if you need to pull out any color, you can with a clean brush. There we go. I'm going to revisit him when he's more fully dry in a minute. But let's look at our background. Let's add some fun little elements to the background. I have this little string here. I'm going to add that in just pen at the end. Oh, and I have pom-poms. Let's add our gray to those. So you can use the same gray that you use for the beards to do your pom-poms. And I just put a few little swoops at the base of the pom-pom, give it a little texture. And then I just let that dry. Leave a lot of white space in my pom-pom. All right, so let's look at our background. Now, I originally said pinks and yellows, but I think I'm going to do some yellows, but more like sunflower yellow and browns in the background to keep this all earth toned. So you don't have to go crazy with planning out the background. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some sunflowers. So I'm going to do a center here, a center here, maybe a center here of a sunflower. So I have 3 little sunflower areas, but I'm going to keep these super simple. With my round brush, I am just going to create petals with my yellow, as you can see here. I'm going to stop when I get to my gnome, so the petals are going behind his beard. So I'm just using pressure, press down, pull up with my round brush. Press down, pull up, press down, pull up. You can go over the same stroke more than once if it doesn't get fat enough or wide enough for you. And I'm going to put that first layer down. Let's do this one over here. Again, once you gets a little tricky getting nice and close to the gnome without going over. And you might have to turn your paper. You can definitely do that for the sake of the camera. I'm trying to work my best around it without turning my paper. All right, and you can see my petals are a little spaced out on this layer because we're going to add another layer to those petals. So I'm going to take a brown. I'm going to make a brown. And take some yellow and magenta and make an orange. Little phthalo blue, more magenta, more yellow. So I'm just mixing magenta, basically making an orange with a little bit of blue in it, a little cobalt blue or phthalo blue. Cobalt, I find, tends to work a little better with this. And then you could always add a darkening. I'm going to add a little Payne's gray to this just to deepen it. All right, so now I have this dark brown color. I'm just going to put that right in the middle. I'm going to go around the edges here. See how I'm going around the edges of the circles. Some of my little petals were still wet. That's fine. I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm going to go just so the center is a little bit lighter. If you go too far, you can pull out color, just like we did on those noses. All right, we're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we're going to add another layer on those, more details. All right, we're going to jump back to some or we're going to jump into some green foliage in the background and then finish up with our noses and the details on the sunflowers. Whoops. All right, so let's jump into with some sap green. Take some of this sap green again. And I'm just going to start to fill in some of these areas. I'm going to go right up to my tape and off the page with some leaves. Oops, I did not want to get a big green splotch on his beard, although not the end of the world. Do some flicks of grasses. You can overlap your gnomes. I'm going to overlap them a little bit. Some leaves coming in here. Definitely some stems and leaves in here. And I'm just making my leaves by pressing down on my brush and lifting back up. And I'm not being too precise. I'm going to let this leaf overlap that sunflower. Okay. So now we filled in some of those gaps. Let's put in another layer. I think these are dry. We're going to make an even more yellowy orange petal. Now I'm going to go over and make some smaller petals over these sunflowers. So I'm putting them in between. They're a little bit shorter than the originals. In between here, boop, boop, boop. And so far I've used the same brush for all of these. And you can even go through and wait for these to dry and do even a third layer if you want. I'm going to throw in some more yellow. This is straight diarylide yellow, which is a nice warm orangey yellow. And then what really makes these pop are going to be the details that we throw in there. Take a little more green, fill in this little gap here. And again, you can do little overlapping flicks of green and yellow. And you can see these last few, I did much darker color, so it's a much darker version of this sap green. It's very straight, not a lot of water. But what really makes our paintings pop is when we build in that contrast. So overlapping, contrasting pieces. All right, now I did say I would go back in and give another layer to those noses, which I'm definitely going to do. Just kind of filling in these white spaces with little taps of green. Okay, so let's go back to those noses. I'm going to switch to a much smaller brush. I actually have a number 2 right here. You could definitely use a 4. This is actually a little smaller than I'm used to. But around the edge and the bottom of these noses, I'm going to do another kind of layer, and then even across the brim to give a little shadow. Clean off my brush, blend it out. There we go. So we have more substantial noses, and then I'm going to pick up some Payne's Gray, which is basically my version of black in this. I'm going to use that around the edge of these sunflowers to just dot in that sunflower texture. Do that over here. I'm being nice and rough and sketchy. Don't want them to be perfect little dots, but creating more of that contrasty space. Pick up some more of my brown. And really just giving some dimension to these little sunflowers. Bring in a little more brown here. We're almost done. All right, perfect. So now that we have our background in, we can also add some details to the hats with our bleed proof white. So I'm going to just add some white details by adding to this one. My brush is a little wonky. Some little polka dots. They're going to be tiny ones, not big ones. Remember, if you go up to the edge, you only see half the circle. Or a portion of it usually. I might have to get a different brush really quick. This one has seen better days. So these aren't perfect little polka dots, but they are perfect for this gnome. They got some funky edges on them. Not perfectly round, but that's okay. And then for this, so I'm going to do boom, boom. Just going to accentuate and clean up these edges. My bleed proof white has also seen better days too. It's not very fluid. I've left the top off one too many times. Go. Boom, boom. There we go. Ta-da! Don't forget these guys down here, which I keep forgetting. You could even add a little highlight on the nose. A more distinct highlight with your bleed proof white if you wanted to. I think I'm going to leave the yellow hat just plain yellow. Let that lie. And then last, but certainly not least, you can go in with your micron pen. So I have this little micron pen. These are great. You can get them in a pack of like 6, and they come in various sizes in that pack of 6. So I'm just going to go in and add a few sketchy details with my pen to the beard and the mustache. So I'm not outlining things. I'm using this to enhance shape and texture. I'm sketching. If I do start to outline, I'm not outlining the whole thing. Use it on my pom-poms because they have a lot of texture in them. Maybe around my noses, definitely in the beards. This guy, my friend here, my very shaggy beard, I can definitely use it a lot on him. And I could go along the stripes in here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to define this a little bit on the edge. Oh, I ran it through some wet paint, I think. There we go. You can use it to add some details to your sunflowers to the petals. And they come in all sizes. So this is a very fine line one. This is an 005, and that is very, very thin, which is what I wanted for this. But they have slightly thicker widths of the nubs as well. All right, let's peel our tape off. Now I could spend another hour on this, refining all the little details, and you definitely can. But I love this cute little postcard looking Gnome Trio. I love that I did these guys in a different color palette with some really cool earth tones in a little sunflower garden. I think that's just a really neat way to capture a similar subject, but really go a whole different direction. So thanks for joining me. I'm Shayna Cersei. I hope you paint this adorable gnome trio or other gnomes. Now that you know how to draw them, you can definitely put them in all different kinds of compositions. So happy painting, everyone, and until next time, I'll see you soon.